learnings that we have, but also the amazing community that we have around the room here. So we are in the third day. It's an action-packed day. So no, please stay. It's not the last day and therefore the last session and I have to pack karna hai. Abhi bahut kaam hai. And this is going to be a very interesting day because there are 3 major sessions that we have planned for you. The first session, we were wondering how to discuss the whole electrification agenda with all of you. So, what we decided to do is to bring you 2 different segments. One is the mobility electrification, and then the other is the energy electrification. And they're connected, but they're also 2 separate parts of that big issue. तो अगर आप सोचिए, मैं बार-बार कहती हूँ, मैंने पहले दिन भी कहा था कि India's energy trajectory is going to be different from the rest of the world. हम ये नहीं कह पाएंगे कि हम बिल्कुल ही कोल से बाहर निकल रहे हैं, वो हो नहीं पाएगा अभी. किसी समय में हो सकता है अगर हम प्लान बनाएं, मगर अभी नहीं हो सकता. तो जो विनीत और अनिल जी बताएंगे वो है कि किस तरह से you have a situation in which we are basically talking about doubling our energy क्योंकि हमें और ऊर्जा चाहिए. We need more energy. We have huge energy poverty in the country. So we cannot afford to say कि हम तो low carbon करेंगे. Low carbon हमारे purpose से आएगा. So we have to double our energy consumption between now and 2030. But we also have imperatives that have to drive the green transition. So the first thing that, firstly I was saying, I don't care about Mr. Trump to a large extent, only because I think our green transition is going to be based on our local needs. Why are we doing it? We need to be clear. If we are not clear why we are doing it, then we will be like the rest of the world. We will just go from one end to the other. Now, why do we need? The first session is about green mobility. Now, we will hear from both Anumita as well as Mahua on what is the need, but also the status, and what are the questions that are still there. Now, from my point of view, the green mobility discussion is critical in a country like India because of local air pollution. I am not looking at electrification of vehicles, at least, and I hope you will agree with me, both of you, that for us, the driver of green electrification is both, there are 2 imperatives. One is, of course, our import bill. We import a very large amount of oil, and therefore the more electrification we do, the more we will move out of oil. But then, of course, we also have the challenge of green energy, which must drive this. But nevertheless, that's one. But the real driver for green electrification is the growing toxic air pollution in our cities. And we know that if we want to be able to deal with air pollution, and Anumita spoke about it yesterday, vehicles are a very important part of the overall pie. And so what then is the role of the mobility transformation in the electrification agenda, and where do we stand? I'm not going to take more time. Anumita, the floor is yours. And 15 minutes, Anumita? 20?
Too many elements here, as you will see here. As per the program.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Srinita. So, we open the SOE and a chapter on electric mobility. It tries to answer one singular question. Are we prepared to meet all the intended targets that have been set or said about the target for electrification by 2030? So there have been a range of ministerial announcements that we should be 30 at 30. But then Niti Aayog said we could even be 70 to 80% for 2 and 3 wheelers. India signing on to a global pledge for 100% electrification in the time frame of 2040, And SIAM, even the industry is saying that 40% electrification would be the industry target, right? So much has been said, and clearly the question is, are we even getting there? And why do we need that? Now, the first question we really want to answer something, the question that actually Sunita just raised, that why electrification? Yes, clearly, as she also said, that one most propelling argument for electrification in our cities is the dirty air. And therefore, zero tailpipe emissions is what you need if you really need to meet the clean air benchmark. Keeping in mind the rising motorization, but also keep in mind the very rapid increase in the number of SUVs in our cities now that emit, even after meeting BS6 standards, about 2 to 6 times more than the smaller cars, right? So it certainly is a big agenda. Second big agenda is the whole energy transition that we require because of the whole energy security issue. And we know that today the road transport that uses up more than 90% of the fuel that we use in the transport sector. And going forward, it is the cars and the trucks that are going to really increase the demand for energy manifold. And so the energy demand that we now will be looking at in the future, and if we have to tame that, and along with that, the CO2 emissions and the local air pollution, then again, this needs a big electrification agenda. And all the studies are saying that if India really needs to meet its net zero target, then electrification is the way. But there's another issue, because here I would also like to try and demystify some of those issues, because a lot of time when we talk about electrification, the first question that is asked, but what about, wouldn't electricity increase the emissions, because we will be sourcing our electricity from thermal power plants, right? But the studies that have come up already in India showing that even at the current mix of 70% coal in our grid, right, if you take the life cycle emissions, and considering even the drilling, etc., for the internal combustion engine, then even today, the emissions, both greenhouse and local emissions, are lower for electric vehicles compared to an ICE vehicles. But even more interesting is this data, which is saying that, and we believe that all we'll be talking about, that as we progress and increase the share of renewable in our grid, automatically the emissions from EV will continuously reduce without doing something additional about the car or the vehicles, right? So here you actually have a data for e-scooters, cars and SUVs that those produced in 2021 at the current grid, what is the potential reduction in emissions compared to an ICE vehicle? But the same when you produce in 2030 with higher share of renewable in the grid, then the potential reduction is even much higher, right? So that's what is the argument for it. The second argument, and another question that people ask, but what, suppose if we really go for ambitious electrification, what is it going to do to an electricity demand? And will it not upset the electricity budget of this country? But again, here the Central Electricity Authority itself has done its own calculation to show that by 2030, even at 30 target, if that is met, the demand will be actually 1.3% of the total electricity that we will be consuming in the country. And while projecting the electricity demand for 2040, they have actually assumed 100% electrification, right? So it is not a huge, and in fact, the other study they are saying that not only that the electrification will require lesser share of electricity, but it will be much less than the electricity demand from space cooling and air conditioning, even when we grow economically. So that's the other question that we are answering. And already what we are seeing in India and different cities, that the trend in electricity demand mainly from the heavy duty public charging, that is, and mainly because of the buses. That share is increasing across different states. So initially we were only e-rickshaw, two-wheelers, small vehicles. But as we are progressing now with bigger vehicles, with more buses, it is the heavy-duty public charging that is increasing in our states. And here, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Delhi, they are taking the lead. Another argument that has come, but then ICE vehicles are also going to become much cleaner. Yes, with BS6 and now we are going to BS7. But keep in mind, the BS7 technology is going to be so much more expensive and so much more complex to meet the tighter emission standards. you have, I'm not repeating here, but the benchmark for the next is going to be when we will be regulating not only local air pollutants but also greenhouse gas emissions, very tough testing procedure, and all the requirements, real world emission requirement. So that's going to be so complex and so much more expensive that a lot of people are saying that that will actually make electrification more cost effective for the next transition. In fact, you may have noticed that when we moved from BS4 to BS6, the cost of cars actually went up by more than 1 lakh, close to 2 lakh. For the diesel buses, more than 3 lakh, right? Now, when we move from BS, so we talk about cost of e-cars or e-vehicles. But then your ICE vehicles cost is also increasing as we keep changing the thing. So, and another point here is that going forward, as the benchmark for ICE vehicles keep becoming more difficult, what will happen? The emission control systems that you require cannot be packaged inside a small car. So that will in any case push the market towards bigger cars and SUVs. And we have seen in Europe that as a result of that, the small car market has got completely decimated. Even in India, when we moved to BS6, in fact, there has a 30% reduction in small car share, right? So if we are going more towards SUVs because of increase in an improvement in emission standards, then what I and others are saying that it will increase your energy demand more. No point in increasing energy demand more by increasing the size of the engine and then try to bring in fuel efficiency standards to somehow reduce the impact a little bit. But they are saying more cost effective, then electrification of the SUV will be much more energy efficient and cost effective going forward. So these are the questions that are coming up and hybridization and so forth. So if that we keep in mind, now what is actually happening in India right now? So you have the fuel economy standards, you are demand incentives under FAME, production-linked incentives, state EV policies, charging infrastructure, battery ecosystem, mobility strategies, and financing strategies. So the question that we are asking that are we leveraging this? Now, so if you look at the current electrification, then it is still very low. If you are really talking about 6.8% overall. So 6.8% today, how can you be 30 at 30? That's the first question. And what you have here is that the e-two-wheeler and e-automation, that's where you've seen the maximum change so far. So the bigger vehicles are still much smaller. And across the states, what you see, electrification largely, like Assam, other, Tripura, they're all led by e-rickshaws, right? And the other states more by two-wheelers. And in the states also, you will find that in northern states, where it is more propelled by e-rickshaws, but the southern states do not have e-rickshaws at all. So the nature of the electrification is also very different. So what are the levers and can we really get there? So first one is, and I just hope you will all look into this matter very carefully because right now Bureau of Energy Efficiency is working on the new fuel efficiency standards for the cars. And what they are saying that if you make that, and the other vehicles, so if you make that stringent, then that will require more electrification to meet the new targets. And the new proposal is, so currently if you're at 130 CO2 standards, then the proposal is by 2027 you should be 91 and by 32 70. 70 is equal to what a two-wheeler emits today in terms of CO2. That's where you want to take the bigger vehicles. Now we really have to push this hard and we have to focus and write more about this. The other part is that the major focus so far has been on the FAME incentive as a key driver of change. And it has been crafted in many ways over a period of time. And we have seen how the incentives have changed initially for two-wheeler, three-wheelers. Then they reduced the share for two-wheelers. And now they have again expanded it. Now they have brought bigger vehicles into it. But the upshot of the whole argument here that you can see how this is changing, that in what two-wheelers and three-wheelers, we are more or less meeting the target number for which the incentives been given, but not so much for the bigger yet. But how is it impacting the cost of the vehicle? If you look at the two-wheelers, you can see that with the incentives for two-wheeler, it has actually brought a price parity with the ICE counterpart. And even in the cars for the commercial applications. So, and auto rickshaws. So, what essentially means that, so if you have got the price parity here, so that is what is now supposed to propel the market. Also, what has happened, the big impact of this is, now we are beginning to see that total cost of ownership of the newer varieties are actually coming down over a period of time. So it has, because of the market growing, you are seeing more diversity in the models, and you are also seeing the vehicles are improving in terms of range. So at the same cost, you are getting a much bigger range now, and it is expected to stimulate consumer demand. But what we have to keep in mind that the segments like two-wheeler, and this is the data that shows that when with the help of incentive, the two-wheeler market started to explode, at that point of time they thought it is time now we can reduce the incentive. But it's too price sensitive. The moment they did it, just see the how the two-wheeler demand fell. Now we have to see, but that also happened because the safety regulations, etc., for two-wheeler were also tightened, so the cost had also gone up. So now we have to see how this market will stabilize at the current level of incentive. So, but the bigger issue is not about the market. It's very interesting to see that already how the investments for production have begun to scale up. And here, if you look at it, it's fascinating that initially, like in the two-wheeler market, initially just 3 years ago, it is only 3 OEMs who dominated the market with 84%. And the conventional ones, the Bajaj and TVS, who did not believe that this is going to happen, they stayed away. But just within 3 years now, both Bajaj and TVS are in the market and their market share have begun to increase. Now, this is the most volatile and this is where we're going to see massive change. Even in different cities, initially just few players, and now you have so many players in the two-wheeler market selling two-wheelers. Same thing with the car. Now the Tatas, they dominate 68%, but between Tata, MG and Mahindra, 90% of the market. And but more important for you to notice, and that's why we have to take this more seriously, that now today Tata's total production of cars, 10% is already EV. That means their own individual commitment and investments have already scaled up. So here it kind of tells you it is no point, I have no scope of turning back. But it only has to go forward and same question that is coming up. So, but very important, you need to keep in mind, like in two-wheelers, the incentives have played a big role. In cars, you don't have incentive and we don't want to give public money to incentivize personal mobility. And yet the car market has taken off, Tata's and others making investments. Only thing that is slowing it down is the uncertainty around charging. And that's why in Maharashtra, for instance, like even in Delhi, they say that our RWs do not allow to set up charging stations, a lot of people want to buy electric cars, a lot of complaints coming. In Maharashtra, High Court has now given order for to the RWs that no, you have to do that, they have been mandated to do this. But if this kind of changes happen, then that market will take off. The bus, now the biggest story of India is the bus transition, which Mohua will talk about. And to tell you that over a period of time, that with initially giving incentive to reduce the capital cost of the bus, but then, and Mohua has been a big part of that, she spearheaded that process, in which they have also looked at if so many buses are to be bought, can you aggregate the demand? And with that, they have shown a massive decline in the prices, okay, which has made it so much more competitive vis-a-vis the diesel and the CNG buses. But so we will hear more about this, how they did it, but they have not stopped here. Initially, all this was happening to only support the upfront capital cost. But now the new, and what has been, even in the new budget, the money that has come for what they call payment guarantee scheme, where they are saying, no, now we are going to support not only the purchase of the bus, but also the operation of the bus for next 12 years. It's a big innovation in India, which the entire world is looking at, and it's a huge application. But keep in mind that in all the incentive programs for buses, we are committed almost 40,000 electric buses to come in next 2 years. If it comes, provided with all things, then there are, so they say that in the next 2 years, at least 1 lakh more buses are needed in India. Okay, and some more. But if that is so, and 40,000 e-buses with committed support, then imagine how we can catalyze a much bigger market for a scalable market. So that's where we are looking at how this can be taken forward, and we will hear more about this from Mohua. But and now all the state governments looking at some of the segments. One is the bus segment, another is the aggregator segment, ride-hailing, and the deliveries. Delhi is the most evolved policy. There are a lot of challenges. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but they are looking at how that can be done. And last 2 segments that I just want to touch upon quickly. And what is now saying, and if you have looked at the Union Budget and the Economic Survey, for the first time that the government of India has been so explicit about developing EVs as an industrial policy. And what they are saying, that itself written in the Economic Survey, that all our programs to support EVs will not work if we do not localize manufacturing. And they have talked about the uncertainty around the EV supply chains, the mineral access to minerals, and So this is a big part of the story. But what we have to keep in mind that today, if we really have to scale up that 30 at 30, now imagine the kind of battery that you require in the market, the amount of battery. Not a projection. By 2030, we did 148 gigawatt, 300 gigawatt. And now we also know that there's a committed fund to produce 50 gigawatt, with the production linked incentive. And this is that the industry will have to produce and sell this battery, and only then they will be able to access that battery. But if you do the reality check, if by 2030 market has to absorb 50 gigawatt, right now we are only absorbing 4 to 5 gigawatt of battery. Okay? Now, how you scale up from 4 to 5 to 50, and for the industry to get the incentive by selling 50 gigawatt, right? In fact, what they are saying, even if the entire two-wheeler, three-wheeler that we are trying to support through our FAME comes into the market, that will still be only 2.3 gigawatt. So the numbers are that if you really want 30 and 30, your 20% demand has to come for two-wheeler, 30% from the four-wheeler, 12% LCV, 16% utility. Only then you'll be able to absorb and scale up the market. Okay, these maths have to add up. But that also means we also have to change a lot of things in terms of building support for the entire supply ecosystem. The Karnataka is one state where they have gone beyond the central support, where they are now supporting the local battery manufacturing, and that will be important. So a lot more thing that we really have to look at how to take that forward. But it is also being said that with demand incentive, you can stimulate demand for the vehicle. But now the government is talking about actually a supply side mandate, where it will ask the OEMs that out of your total sales every year, a certain percentage of your sales should be ZEV. Right? And this is needed for two reasons. One, if you only have demand incentive, then you and I as customers are competing in the market for the few models, and there's an upward pressure on prices. But if there's a supply side mandate, then OEMs will compete with each other to sell in the market, and there will be a downward pressure on the market. Okay? And then there will be more diversity and so on. That's why it's very important for upscaling it, and this will also bring a lot more certainty into the market and investments. And we have done some studies to show that how OEMs are actually willing to take on mandates and how much they are willing to support, and you can see it from here. But the biggest and the last 2 points that at one point is that the challenge now is about if you are building battery, then where is the whole critical minerals coming from? Okay? And so at one level, India has a big program how to source it from outside, from India. But then that's one part of the story. But the even bigger part of the story is something linked to the circularity that we discussed yesterday, how that's going to play out in the EV sector. And it is being said that once you have imported your critical mineral and your batteries into India, then it becomes your domestic resource, which can then be used in perpetuity. So what is once got inside the battery, it is your own domestic resource. And then you have to keep taking it out and reusing it. Now that's what we now have to do. Now India has started doing it, but it's very small scale, and now the waste EV battery will now begin to explode in the coming years. But the capacity right now in India mostly is that you can only take out the black mass out of the spent battery. But the paradox is, and that's the irony, we take out the black mass, but because we cannot refine it for our own internal domestic use, we export our black mass. That means you're actually exporting your resources out of the country. When we're talking about both supply chain constraints on critical minerals. So now we have Ministry of Environment's battery EV policy, which is actually mandated that the producer of batteries will have to include 5% of the recovered materials in the new battery, and by 2027 and 20% by 2031. Right? Even state governments are talking about this. So that is going to be one big change, but then you also have to innovate a lot more the battery chemistry so that you can reduce the difficult minerals like the cobalt and nickel, etc., which is already happening. We also need mandatory battery durability requirement, which is actually coming with the BS7 standards in India. Right? And we need more energy efficient and smaller batteries. And CEC has worked with DSC, and now, as you know, the Anushanghan program looking at the battery development trajectory and roadmap in India. So, what I would say here, and my last slide, that We certainly need ambition and leadership in the market, but what is more important, if investments are started, we need committed market that needs long-term policy visibility with targets and regulatory mandates. Being a segment-wise LEV mandate and target, demand incentive to be designed better for long-term policies, state-level action to be strengthened, but we need scalable, integrated, connected, reliable electric public transport system. And here, for the first time, the economic survey says that if we have to de-risk our supply chain around critical mineral, we need sufficiency measures. We have to expand our electric mobility, not private mobility, to reduce the demand for battery and critical minerals. It's a very interesting connection made for the first time in India, right? So that's where we want to be, and we want to expand the, as I said, all the requirements and so forth. So all of this we'll have to do. Not doing it is not an option. And this is what I want to end with, Sumita, what you have seen earlier. Kochi people are here. When I went there, imagine this is the paradigm shift we want in our cities. You land in Kochi airport, which is 100% powered by solar energy, locally generated by the airport. Okay? You board an electric bus to connect with the metro system. Even the 40% of electricity of the metro system is solar powered. And that connects you with the water boat, which is also electric to connect with all the islands that connects the mainland and the islands, right? So it's zero mobility on clean energy, and it is electric public mobility. That's the change we are looking for across all cities of India. Thank you.
I think other than the vote, we're looking for that, okay? I don't think we're going to get votes in, well, I think even the sewage canals of India, the votes are not going to happen, but I think that would be amazing. So thank you, Anamita. I think fascinating as always, a lot of information, but the idea... I got it? Yeah. So, thank you, Anamita. Fascinating, lots of information. Clearly, this is for you to digest at a later time, but she's here, so you can ask her, and the presentation will be out there. The idea is for you to understand the range of issues and the really exciting work that is happening. And that's what I want to bring in Mahua Acharya. Mahua is actually at the center of a lot of this. And what we find very nice, amazing, Mahua, is really the whole bus story of India, which is a good news story. And we need to talk about it. And the efforts that you put in to be able to aggregate the demand, to be able to procure buses at lower rates. And of course, now we make sure that those buses are on the roads and are working. But I think, there's always a challenge in India, but there's also an amazing fact that something really dramatic is happening. So that's why we're very privileged to have you. Brief us, and please go ahead. You can take the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunita. Thank you. Oh, sure. Thank you for having me. And Anamita, thank you for inviting me to this really gorgeous place. And it's so lovely to even do this at 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Okay, so I don't have slides. And I'm happy to share numbers at some point if needed. What I can do, and what I was thinking of doing, because this is largely a journalist crowd, I can give you a story on the bus work. And might even share some of the challenges that perhaps you can then, at some point between now and the next 2 years, pick up to investigate further. And make sure that I would like for us as a country to have sufficient media, of course, encouragement and spotlight, but also questions of when they need to be asked. So, when we started this bus program, so let me back up. The reason, so I went into the government. I was one of those outside hires. I was there for a few years, and somewhere along the way decided to focus on electric mobility. We had a program on two-wheelers, which at that point I decided to stop. Because as Anamita showed you, you didn't need the market was picking up by itself, the subsidy was good enough, so I did question whether any of my own effort being in the government would be useful. So somewhere along the way, we chose to work on buses, because for two reasons. One is it is the hardest to do. Second, it is also the most bang for the buck. Greatest bang for the buck as far as money is concerned, as far as people and social impact is concerned, as far as just public mobility. So it's the one thing that checked all the boxes, but I do remember thinking, my God, this is going to be very difficult. So we had the only way to achieve scale, we had to do this at scale, is to be able to aggregate demand. Now what that means is, normally the traditional model for public buses, so let me back up a little bit. India has 2.5 million buses. Out of the 2.5 million, 1.5 lakhs sit with public utilities, meaning the transport corporations of the states or the city, wherever you are. The rest is all in private hands. You want to go from here to Jaipur, there are lots of operators. So this 1.5 lakh buses is the tiny little subset that we worked on. So in there, we worked on 9 cities because we said, let's only pick the cities that are big, so they'll give me at least a population and consumer demand. Now you know that transport is a state matter. So this business of aggregating demand meant what? Going to negotiate with states. It's not even a concurrent matter. So you have to go to states and have to get into their needs, and that was already a little bit of a challenge. But the much bigger challenge is now the only way you could get private investment, and you have to get private investment because the government was giving only a little subsidy. We moved this the way the subsidy worked. And we moved from buying buses as buying a bus to buying a service. Now what that did was, it allowed private enterprise to hold that asset, meaning let a private company own that bus. The blue buses you see in Delhi, or actually even here in Gujarat, is owned by a private company and then managed for 12 years. We did 12 years, it was scientifically done, over a period of time. So we moved from buying a physical asset to now buying a service. That has many repercussions because our institutions are very used to buying buses. They're used to owning these things, they're buying the spares. At board meetings, you discuss how many tires you have to get replaced and salary notch-ups for so many staff. But it is the only way to manage today's technology. And technology is changing very, very rapidly. So who is best placed to manage that? We said, that's really out of the private sector. So let's at least design a model that will allow private investment to come in, where the government's job is to define the boundary conditions and maintain those boundary conditions. So the government's job was to define the routes, tell me where the bus should go, and the private company's job was to operate at efficiency and so on and so forth within those parameters. So the subsidy that we were given was for 3,500 buses, was equivalent to 3,572 buses. And then it took us about 7 or 8 months to go around the country to these 9 cities that were considered eligible to say, would you mind signing on to these terms and conditions? So we homogenized the terms and conditions, and you can imagine there was pushback because all cities said, my conditions are different, my roads are different, my turning radius is different, your 12 meter will not fit. All of them were correct. But it is the only way we could get scale. So we went from 500 buses, 500 or 600 that were on the road at that time. So the first tender had 5,500. So now out of this 5,500, only a small patch was incentivized by the central government. And quite honestly, that's the only carrot I had to go into a state and say, join this program. The specs are designed by us. The procurement, most importantly, is done by us, not yourselves. And please try and compromise try not to customize too much because we will not be able to fit these 3 models. So we offered some 9 meter and 12 meter and 7.5 as well. And then we standardized as much as we could. So that's rule number 1, to get scale, you have to standardize. Rule number 2, to get private enterprise, it has to be a bankable contract. So that's the number of months we spent to work on the contractual conditions. So today we have 5,500 that was first released on that tender, and in exchange for a demand signal that private enterprise saw, OEMs in this case, we got a good price. We got 30%, 27% in fact less than diesel. And it took us 10 months from start to opening of tender for the first one. And then in about 2 more months after that, we had to release a second tender for 6,500. So one bus is about 1.5 to 2 crores. The 6,500 tender, you can imagine, is close to $1 billion. So these were very large tenders. So it proves by now that you don't need a subsidy. The third tender failed. We produced a third tender. I mean, I would go into the office and I just worry how many more bus demand I would get and how do I deal with it. You want the demand, but let's go to the next piece on where is the infrastructure? Where are charging stations? Do we have power in our depots? Our depots are used to diesel buses. Most of power they really use is for lights. Now you want these big transformers, and who's going to pay for it? The discoms. Now you have to deal, the STU deals with the DISCOM, which is the energy department, and that's a whole different department, but you have to go through a budget approval process to go to that business. Because the business of transformers is really not the job of a private operator, it's the job of the government to be giving the electrons, for which you pay for it, but you need the transformers at the back end. So that had to work in parallel. So the third tender failed. Because now we have this third leg. So one is of course designing the business model, we had to get that right. Second is you have to work and do a lot of the grunt work on the infrastructure. We had teams going into every single depot to do a laptop on how big is this, can it really fit 90 buses, because anything less than 90 then the power infrastructure is lower and the cost benefits would work out. So we had to find places that could host about 60 to 90 buses. The third leg now is our institutional structure. So we spend all our time working on the contract. Because in my mind, in a developing country like ours, the exchequer shouldn't really have to hold the bill for too long. To incentivize and the market should take over. We have a very vibrant market, we have a very vibrant debt market, we've got financial markets that are very vibrant. So if we define the boundary conditions, provided we define what the outcomes need to be, I think you can work backwards. So the third leg, however, of building a good contract, so we had a very good contract. It was transparent, it was level playing field for both sides. Now we still have an institutional structure on the other end. Our state transport utilities, if you look at them, I think we have 58 or 59 of them. And only 5 are in the red. Are in the black. Everybody else is in the red. They are loss-making for years, and it is a very habitual thing to go back to the transport department and ask for a revenue backup. Now, if you look at in the way our states are structured, we've not invested in our state transport undertakings for a long time. They've been there. Now you have a big contract of 3,000 crores with this utility, and a private investor mostly said to us, we don't know if we'll get paid because of experience with our distribution companies and the renewable energy sector, where we don't know if these contracts will be honored. So that got us to create a payment security mechanism. We then created a central system where you get paid for 3 months. If the state defaults, if the state utility defaults, then at least the private enterprise gets paid, and the state utility is then deducted from the back end through this direct debit mechanism. So it took some time to do that, but it almost had to. We couldn't fix also the institutional capacity on the other side, or even the institutional ability to hold a contract like that. So areas that we should now work on. As I speak today, we have about 10,500 buses on rolling. On roads, and this is as if you look at the Vahan quarter, maybe there's more. I'm about 2 months out of date. So 10,500 buses are rolling. 27,000, maybe almost 30,000 now have been contracted. So our 40,000 number we're getting there. Because why not? This is a profitable model. Because why not? Now, but you have to hold it. You have to hold it very carefully. And you have to monitor and manage it carefully. And what do you have to manage? I don't know if it's working. It's been 3 years from the time the first bus came in. I already know what are some of the areas we should have done better, but we couldn't do it we just didn't know enough at that time. One example, Delhi needs about 400 megawatts of power. When we were building this program, I was looking around to see how much power, where will the power come from. All the studies that were out there were at a macro level that said we need 4 gigawatts of power. That was nice, but really we just didn't have time to do a power assessment need DISCOM by DISCOM or STU by STU. So Delhi needs 400 megawatts of power. I'm coming back from Bangalore, needs about 300 and something megawatts of power. Most of it is in certain areas where the substations actually don't have capacity and they're loaded. So these are the things we've got. These are the things that trip us up as a country because we're retrofitting. Our cities are as they are, and we've parachuted this bus program on our crowded cities, and so we do as much as we can do. The renewable energy charging is now it is cheaper. So the private counterpart on the other side is incentivized to go and find charging through renewables. So is the STU, because the way we designed it is we set up to Delhi tariff, the price will hold up to Delhi tariff. If the tariff goes above that, the STU goes and pays. So now the STU is also quite incentivized to find that the same buses charge with renewables because they don't want to pay an additional bill, and the same thing with private enterprise. So both sides are incentivized to go and find a lower tariff, which in this case is renewable energy. But now as the rubber hits the road, the policies for renewable energy are state by state. Where you buy from, you pay tax, you have wheeling. Do I buy on power purchase agreement? If the utility says to me, this is green, is it enough for me for claiming green benefits and things like that? So these are the areas. And then the last one is to do with the workforce. We have a situation in the country where, that's my last point, our state transport utilities have thousands of drivers, thousands of staff actually, not just drivers. Kerala has 38,000, I think Bangalore has about 28,000, Delhi probably is about hitting 40,000. We have a lot of staff, we have a lot of drivers and a lot of staff. Bangalore, I know, have stopped recruitment 2 years ago for new drivers because of this model. This model came with the driver comes with a private company. Now what do you do with this driver force? One, you do a VRS and you ask everybody, would you like to leave? People go. So VRS has been done before, but that's not really sustainable. It's also not very obviously not politically sustainable to do this. So there may be a time between now and the next 10 years, until such time our STUs, our state transport undertakings are restructured, we have to do something with this labor force. One area that we have been exploring, I'm now building up this new platform. One of the areas we've been exploring is, can we please retrofit buses? There's also about 40,000 old buses, which are old by a number of years, and our environmental objective is to change the stuff inside it so we're not polluting. So if we can pull that out at safety standards, can we do a life extension program for 7 to 10 years more? Utilize this workforce and then while continuing to transition. So our transition is a bit like a ship turning as opposed to a two-wheeler turning. Just turning radius is a bit bigger. So somewhere in that turning radius can we think of staff utilization, and I think perhaps retrofits might be something to do. So yeah, I'd be happy to take questions.
Yeah, we
or
will.
anything.
What I want to do is to bring in Vineet and Ajay and then open it up to questions. So hold on to your questions on this session because I want to give everyone a chance to ask questions. And I'm hoping to have at least 40 minutes. So let's work at it. I'm so happy as Vineet sets up. I'm so happy, Nora, that you're actually, you can see it there. So you can sit here and see that we have that. So I'm so happy you're thinking of retrofits. So that's exactly how we do the CNG transition. Okay? So the CNG transition that happened for 100,000 vehicles in a matter of 1 year, and the buses that moved from diesel, there was a lot of pushback because that was also liquid to gas. There was a different. Now it's liquid or gas to battery, which but it meant that the scale happened at the beginning, and then you can slowly those CNG retrofitted bus phased out, and then the new buses came in. But the first initial easier part of it was to do the retrofits because we got huge scale as a result of it. But we also had an advantage we don't have. which is we had a clear mandate from the Supreme Court that every diesel bus that runs in Delhi for each day had to pay, I think, 1,000 rupees a day at that time for each day of running. So, which meant that we had that stick to get the carrot. And we did get the carrot with subsidy so that they could make the transition. But I seriously believe that India needs sticks. But then I'm old-fashioned. Beneath, please. So this is now, you have the first part, which is the mobility part. And the electrification of the mobility. Now, the real game changer is when that electric power is also renewable power. Because if it is renewable power, then we are really into win-win-win-win-win. Okay? Then we are not only getting clean air in Delhi, but polluting Chhattisgarh. Then you're really into a win-win-win-win-win. Now, where does the electrification from renewable energy stand? My colleague Vineet and I have spent a little time over last month putting together a report which is in your packets as well. And he will present it to you because we believe very strongly that we need an open discussion on renewable energy and the state of renewable energy in India so that we can make sure that we can have it. We are not doing this to say that this is not working, but we are, from our analysis, are essentially saying, let's have a more open, transparent debate about it. Vineet, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Hello. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Smita ma'am, for that introductions about the renewable energy and what exactly the need of today's in the electrification goals of longer run when we talk about 2030 target and all. So, if you we have a kit in your bag, just open to chapter 7. If you can look through some of the tables which I will be discussing in next few slides, where we will just show you a few of the cases that in the left side we have the data of March 2024, that is currently what presently where are we today. In the right side we have the March 2030, that is the optimal generation mix target given by the Central Electricity Regulatory Authority, CEA. So if you see the figure over here, so India's overall installed capacity expected to grow from 445 gigawatt in March 2024 to 777 gigawatt by March 2030. So although we know that fossil fuel will make up to a smaller share of this capacity, they are still projected to generate around 56% of the country's electricity demand by 2030. And here we can see that non-fossil fuel sources are set to increase, rising from 47% of the total installed capacity in 2024, which will increase from 45% to 64% by 2030. Rightly said that if we can say solar power is anticipated to be the main driver for this expansions. The installed capacity of the solar energy is expected to rise from 82 gigawatt to 7 gigawatt from by 2030 as well, and it is projected to supply the entire country's need by 23% of the electricity generations. So here we can see also the wind power capacity, which currently it was 46 gigawatt. It is 46 gigawatt, and by 2030 we are expecting to increase that 46 gigawatt by another 70 gigawatt. That is touching to 100 gigawatt. Now here we can see the total non-fossil installed power capacity, which includes both renewable and non-renewable, which is projected to reach at 501 gigawatts by 2030. Looking at the next section. So here in between 2014 to 2015, we have a installed capacity data in last 10 years. From 2014 to 15 and from 20 to 23, 24, we can see there is a total installed capacity increase from 274 gigawatt to 441 gigawatt. During this period, we can see the share of fossil fuel based capacity drop from 68% to 55%. In this contrast, we can say that non-fossil based fossil fuel based capacity grew from 32% to 45%, which is a change driven primarily by the solar energy. So meanwhile, the installed capacity of coal lignite, which rose from 165 gigawatt to 218 gigawatt as well. The capacity of gas and diesel, we can see that it is remaining constant, which is not increasing that much. Solar capacity experienced a significant growth, increasing from 4 gigawatt to 82 gigawatt, which represents a 3.5 times expansion of the new renewables. From here we can see the wind energy capacity has also doubled from 23 gigawatt to 46 gigawatt. So overall the share of new renewables, which is mainly solar and wind, increased from 14 gigawatt from the installed capacity to 32 by 32%. In the generations perspective, when we look at the installed capacity versus the generations, what is the current status of India? So we can see clearly here the total electricity generations from all the sources, which has increased by 1.6 times from 1090 billion unit in 2014-15 to 1731 billion unit in 2023-24. The fossil fuel has also increased by 1.5 times here. The generations from the new renewables surged by 3.5 times, which is increasing from 65 billion units to around 2 to 5 billion units, which is driving the shift towards cleaner energy. Solar energy saw a remarkable rise from 7 billion units to 116 billion units, which is again making a primary contributor for the renewable energy growth. While we can also see that the total installed capacity of solar capacity has reached 82 gigawatt by March 2024, whereas the rooftop that from solar rooftop, which is accounting around 17% of the total share of the installed capacity. So now when we look at the challenges, we have some of the challenges been put together in your report, and one of the key challenges that we faced, we found here, is the delay of power purchase agreements. So if we try to simplify this, we have a developer here, and we have a power supply agreement in the one side and the power purchase agreement on the another side. So here in the country we have around 4 to 5 renewable energy implementing agencies. One out of that is SECI, Solar Energy Corporations of India. Now they call us for the tenders, and with that tender they sign an agreement for the power purchase agreement with the developer and power sales agreement with the utility or the local discoms, where we get the electricity from them as a consumer. Now the entire ecosystem or the supply of electricity comes in that manner, that where the power supply agreement being signed with the solar renewable energy implementing agencies, and the agreement of power purchase agreement being signed by the developer with the SECI or the renewable energy implementing agencies. Now in here we have seen that a lot of PPAs has been delayed even after the price of the coal, price of the solar is much cheaper than the coal, which is around half or more than half. We have clearly seen a lot of PPAs has been stuck here. Not even PPAs, there has been allegations going on with large corporates houses in India that the bribery case where people are driving or the organizations are driving to the distribution companies or the utilities to buy their power at a cheaper cost, so that they can install the power plant in the predefined tariff. And clearly we can see that there is a lot of PPA delays happening in the country. We have the challenges like transmissions and the grid integrations challenges, where we can see where we have seen that clearly there is a bottleneck issues while we installed so much of electricity, while we installed so much of power, and this being carried forward because it takes so much time to install the transmission corridor. It takes 3 to 3.5 years, whereas for renewable energy projects it takes around 1.5 year to 2 years at max. So here we can see that there is a clear bottleneck for the transmissions infrastructure what being carried out, and we have also the economic and the financial constraints over here. So we can see that there is uncertainties of the PPAs. Now the financial institutions and the developers are they are thinking twice to invest in these projects because these projects are quite riskier, because lately we have seen so many of delays in PPA, cancelled in PPAs. We have policy and regulatory frameworks or uncertainties where we can see that the enforcement of renewable purchase obligations has been inconsistent, where the monitoring or the weak enforcement of renewable purchase obligations has been taken place. It is not that much continuous. Out of 30 states, we have analyzed that 25 states are still lagging. 5 states has meet the target. It has been quite, we need to enforce very stringent and very strongly so that there can be a real enforcement and the entire ecosystem where there can be a clear demand of electricity and the developer can install solar power or any other cleaner projects. We have clear issues of land and supply chain constraints. So acquiring suitable land is often complicated by competing investments, where we can see that such as agricultural use, habitations, environmental considerations for most of the renewable energy projects. Land issues was critical over there. So we need to incentivize, we need to see that how the supply chain or the manufacturing capacity.
I need you to wind up.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay?
So we have the key takeaways. Here we can see that the 500 gigawatt of non-fossil energy target by 2030, which is aims, which is not to displace, which is currently fuels up 75% of the electricity generations, ensuring low carbon growth while addressing energy poverty. We have to progress with the gaps. So clearly we have seen the data in the previous slides. We have the data deficits. Right now we don't have the generation data of solar rooftop. We don't have the generation data of the other projects which have been commissioned. So commissioned projects are there, but there is no generation data out there. So out of that we can't calculate the capacity utilization factor or the CUF of that. Even we have seen multiple project delays even after giving the viability gap funding for offshore or FDRA projects, FDRA RTC projects. So those projects are not taking place. We are probably missing the opportunities. Even there is a case of DRE for rooftop, and clearly we can see there is the requirement of the equitable energy access in the society for many of the DRE applications of fire.
Thank you, Vineet. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Please come and join us here. So the bottom line, every community has so many acronyms, I get so frustrated, okay? And DRE and FDRE and pata nahi kya kya ho jata hai, I go mad. And for me, it's always, mujhe simple samjhao. So, the 2 or 3 takeaways before I ask Kajeti to come is one, India has a policy to not just replace coal, but to displace coal. That's one takeaway that you need to keep in mind. Now, to displace coal means that our renewable energy has to increase, driven by solar, and so that coal as a percentage goes down exactly as Vineet shows to about 50%, and renewable energy goes up. But in that, what our data is showing is that even though the installed capacity is going up, and the big conundrum is that we are still only meeting 13% of our total generation from new renewables. And one of the questions that we have is that we don't know the data on capacity utilization, but more than that, all the rooftop power, this that we have on our plant here. Now, none of this is being fed into a national system, so we know how much of this is getting accounted for. Okay? And this is very important because as Ajay ji will talk about the incredible work that is happening in Rajasthan and other states with the PM Surya Yojana, a lot of it is going to be to make sure that we can measure and monitor. Because we don't want to make sure that all this money is spent in the name of subsidy and that you're not getting renewable energy from it. So 13% is a number that you have to remember. The government, unfortunately, only talks about the fact that we have installed capacity of 450 gigawatt. What we need to do is to remind them that it's not about installation but about generation. Now in that, one of the things further that we have done, and it's in your book, is a number of projects that have not been commissioned. And that is worrying us. Why are they not getting commissioned? And this is after the PPA has been signed. Okay? And this actually, beneath and my inquiry in this started because of the big case that was filed in the United States under SECI. SECI bolte hain na unka, Security Exchange, SEC. Against Mr. Adani, because my point was, if the cost of renewable energy is so cheap, and it is, it's half the cost of a new greenfield coal-based power plant, then why do you need to go and meet the Chief Minister to ask them to buy that power? So what is happening, we need to understand. The bottom line of all this is, and I think that's the point that we need to make as well, is we want more transparency in this system. And Mahua, this is a point also for the bus system. Because remember, you're borrowing for the bus system the same power purchase and guarantee system from the renewable energy system. Where SECI today has been told that if a state agency utility does not pay for the power, then the RBI and SECI will pull out, will get the money from RBI and pay the utility. So it's a guarantee. It's a wonderful arrangement. There is no data. I have looked everywhere for the data. There is no data. Has anyone reneged? Has the money been pulled out? Has the state been forced to pay? If we want this transition to happen, my plea to you and to the renewable energy community, and Ajay, you are a very influential part of the renewable energy community, is this data is not to hurt industry, it is to help industry. And that's really where our position is. So Ajay, let me invite you now before I open the floor. This is really, you play a very important role because the transition has to be driven by the state, ultimately. National is not the point, it's going to be the state. And the whole idea of distributed energy is going to be critical. So your work there is very important, and that's why we wanted Ajay कि आप आए, आप समझाएं, आप किसी भी लैंग्वेज में बोलना चाहें, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. जो भी आप करना चाहें, यहाँ सब लोग समझते हैं.
थैंक यू मैम. और हिंदी में बोलूँगा.
आराम से.
तो और
बिल्कुल ताली बजा दी सब.
मैं तो बहुत ज्यादा डिटेल में ज्यादा नंबर्स, ज्यादा पॉलिसी इस पे डिस्कस करूंगा, ना ही बहुत ज्यादा टाइम लूंगा. मेन जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, भाई मेल आया था आपके यहाँ से, तो उसमें ये था कि ज्यादातर लोग पत्रकार हैं, तो ज्यादा डिटेल में जाने की जगह आप स्टोरी टेलिंग, मतलब भाव बताइए कि क्या कहना चाहते हैं. तो उसी तरह से मैंने तैयारी की.
देखिए, आपके लिए सब लोग नोट भी कर रहे हैं कि आप बिल्कुल सही तरीके से आए हैं प्रिपेयर करके.
तो और मैं एजेंडा है कि 2030 तक 500 गीगावाट तक हमें पहुंचना है. उसमें मैं सिर्फ सोलर का ही पार्ट बताऊंगा, सोलर का क्या अभी तक किया है और कैसे हम पहुंचे, और क्या दूसरा रास्ता हो सकता है वहां तक पहुंचने का, जो कि अच्छा भी है, सुगम भी है और ठीक भी है. फिर भी हम वो रास्ता क्यों नहीं ले रहे. बस ये 2-3 चीजें ही बात करूंगा. तो जैसे सोलर की बात करें तो 2010 में जवाहरलाल नेहरू सोलर मिशन जब आया था तो 20 गीगावाट का टारगेट रखा था 2022 तक. वो कुछ हद तक बहुत ज्यादा काम नहीं हुआ. फिर 15 में इस टारगेट को बढ़ाया गया 100 गीगावाट. अब देखिए 100 गीगावाट था, इसमें 40 गीगावाट जो था वो रूफटॉप का था और 60 था ग्राउंड का. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है। रूफ टॉप को हमेशा वैल्यू दी गई, मतलब ये 66% है उसका देखें ग्राउंड के उसमें, या 40% तो टोटल टारगेट का ही है। जब दिसंबर 2022 तक हम पहुंचे तो हमने क्या अचीव किया, अगर पूरे सोलर को देखें तो 85% हमने ग्राउंड का तो कंप्लीट कर दिया था, लेकिन रूफ टॉप में हम बहुत ज्यादा लैग कर रहे थे। सिर्फ 7.5 गीगावाट किया, जो कि 18-19% के आसपास ही है। और ये कहानी तब से लेके अभी तक इसी तरह से चल रही है। रूफ टॉप पे बहुत ज्यादा फोकस नहीं है। जैसे अभी मैंने बताया सूर्य घर योजना आई है तो थोड़ा सा काम बढ़ा है। वो भी जब हम रूफ टॉप की बात करते हैं तो वो सिर्फ घरेलू नहीं है, C&I भी है, कॉमर्शियल, इंडस्ट्रियल, रेजिडेंशियल सभी है। तो ठीक है, सूर्य घर से थोड़ा काम बढ़ा है, बट अभी तक यही है। फिर 2022 के बाद हम लोग ये नई चीज अभी सुनने लगे कि भाई 2030 तक हमें 500 गीगावाट करना है, जिसमें जो अगर बाइफर्केट करें तो सोलर को 300 गीगावाट तक पहुंचना है वहां पे, और वो पहुंच भी जाएगा, उससे आगे निकल सकते हैं अगर हम ठीक से करें तो इसमें बहुत ज्यादा डिटेल में नहीं जाना। ये तो मैंने ईयर वाइज कुछ नंबर्स बताए, लेकिन अगर आप इसमें एक नंबर देखेंगे रूफटॉप सोलर और ग्राउंड माउंटेड, तो आप देखिए वो जितना ग्राउंड हो रहा है उसका 10 से 15% ही है रूफटॉप। मतलब रूफटॉप पे कभी भी फोकस नहीं था। 2019 में रूफटॉप को बढ़ावा देने के लिए RTS फेज 2 आया। वो वर्ल्ड बैंक के भी फाइनेंस वहां से भी आया था कि भाई आप रूफटॉप को बढ़ावा दें। तो वहां पे एक सब्सिडी स्कीम निकाली गई, जो कि ट्रस्ट, सोसाइटीज, घरेलू जो कनेक्शन है उन पे सब्सिडी दी जाएगी। ये भी पूरी कोशिश की गई, लेकिन रूफटॉप को बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ावा नहीं मिला। इसका एक रीजन तो ये था कि जैसे अभी हम ज्यादातर जब भी सोलर की बात करते हैं तो मैं राजस्थान से हूँ, तो राजस्थान में हमेशा बहुत ज्यादा खुश होते हैं हम लोग कि हम टॉप पे हैं। लेकिन वो टॉप इस तरह से है कि सेकी के टेंडर निकले, बड़ी कंपनीज JSW, अडानी, टाटा, इन्होंने प्रोजेक्ट्स लगाए। वो सिर्फ इस तरह है कि जो बंजर जमीन पड़ी हुई है, लैंड बैंक है सिर्फ राजस्थान। न तो राजस्थान को रोजगार मिल रहा है, न तो राजस्थान के को बिजली मिल रही है, राजस्थान को उससे कुछ भी नहीं मिल रहा है। बस हम इसलिए खुश हैं कि भाई हमारे यहाँ पे ये चीज पैदा हो गई। जैसे यहाँ पे एक खेत किसी को देते और कहते हैं कि सबसे ज्यादा आंवले हमारे यहाँ पैदा हो रहे हैं, जबकि हमें एक भी आंवला नहीं मिल रहा, और तुमने रेंट पे खेती दे रखी है। तो
हमें तो आंवला मिला
क्योंकि आपने खुद लगाया ना,
हमने खुद लगाया और हमने खुद खाया।
वो नहीं कर रहा राजस्थान। राजस्थान में क्या है, फायदा तभी मिलेगा जब रूफ टॉप लगेगा। रूफ टॉप लगने से वहां की MSMEs को काम मिलता है, जॉब क्रिएशन होता है, और जो एंड यूजर है वहां का उसको फायदा मिलता है। लेकिन रूफ टॉप पे काम नहीं है। उसकी बहुत बड़ी वजह हमेशा रहा है डिस्कॉम। डिस्कॉम को ये लगता है कि उसके कंज्यूमर अगर चले जाएंगे, देखिए डिस्कॉम हमेशा घाटे में ही रहती है अपने यहाँ। डिस्कॉम अपने आप को प्रॉफिट और लॉस से बाहर निकाल चुके हैं। वो अपने आप को देखते हैं, एक कोई भी एएन ऑफिस देखे, वो अपने आप को सिर्फ एक कलेक्शन सेंटर की तरह देखते हैं, प्रॉफिट सेंटर की नहीं देखते हैं। वो देखते हैं कि यहाँ पे मेरा कलेक्शन कम हो जाएगा, अगर कंज्यूमर्स कम हो गए तो कलेक्शन कम हो जाएगा। जबकि वो जो बिजली एक घरेलू उपभोक्ता को दे रहे हैं, अगर 100 यूनिट दे रहे हैं तो 140 यूनिट खरीदनी पड़ रही है उसी ग्राउंड माउंटेड से। लेकिन ठीक है, वहां से वो कलेक्शन हो रहा है, कलेक्शन पे ही चल रही है उनकी दुनिया, वो प्रॉफिट लॉस से बाहर है। तो कोई काम बढ़ा नहीं। अब इससे यही निकला कि ग्राउंड माउंटेड पे काम हो रहा था, रूफ टॉप पे बिल्कुल काम नहीं हुआ। फिर PM सूर्य घर मुफ्त बिजली योजना आई, उसके बाद थोड़ा सा काम बढ़ा, और आप देखिए पॉलिसीज में अचानक बदलाव आ गया। सारी डिस्कॉम, पहले क्या होता था कि अगर आप सोलर के लिए एक एप्लीकेशन लगाने जाएंगे, अगर किसी ने अपने घर पे लगवाया तो उन्हें पता होगा कि आपके वेंडर को या आपको 8-10 चक्कर तो डिस्कॉम के लगाने पड़ेंगे। आप साइन करवाओ, वो हॉस्पिटल में भी है कंज्यूमर तो भी बुलाएंगे कि आप आओ यहीं आके साइन करो एग्रीमेंट पे, डिमांड निकलेगी, फिजिबिलिटी होगी। जबकि वो कहीं पे फिजिबिलिटी या घरेलू प्रोजेक्ट के लिए फिजिबिलिटी या कोई भी डिस्कॉम का ऑफिसर वहां जाता नहीं है, लेकिन उनको डिले करना है। ये इतनी सारी बातें मैं इसलिए बता रहा हूँ कि जब भी हम रिन्यूएबल या सोलर की बात करते हैं तो उसकी कॉन्सेप्ट में मतलब बेस में होता है सस्टेनेबिलिटी, एनवायरमेंट, रिन्यूएबल, ये सारी चीजें होती हैं, लेकिन ये बाद में कहीं दब जाता है। पता हम जो सोलर या ये जो भी लगा रहे हैं इसको बिजली बनाने के लिए लगा रहे हैं या सस्टेनेबिलिटी के लिए लगा रहे हैं, वो कॉन्सेप्ट हम भूल जाते हैं। बस वो काउंटिंग होती है गीगावाट या गीगावाट आवर में, चलो यूनिट्स पे हो रही है, कितनी बिजली बन रही है, वहीं तक रह जाते हैं हम। उस बेस को वो डिस्कॉम भी भूल गया। डिस्कॉम को हालांकि वो समझ भी नहीं आता है कि रूफ टॉप से इन्हें क्या फायदा है। तो अब क्या हुआ, बहुत इजी कर दी गई चीजें कि आपको लोड एनहेंसमेंट के लिए डिस्कॉम नहीं जाना है। अगर आपका 1 किलोवाट भी लोड है और 5 किलोवाट लगाना है तो आप सीधा एप्लीकेशन लगाइए, मीटर डाल दीजिए और सब कुछ आसान कर दिया जाएगा। अब तो इस समय हम लोग टोटल सोलर जो इंस्टॉल्ड हो चुका है वो 100 गीगावाट हमने कर लिया है। टोटल रिन्यूएबल की बात करें तो 200 है, जिसमें 100 गीगावाट सोलर का है। अब सोलर का टारगेट जो है वो 300 गीगावाट है। इसका मतलब 200 गीगावाट हमें करना है 5 साल में, 40 गीगावाट पर ईयर के हिसाब से, जो कि बहुत ज्यादा नहीं। बहुत ज्यादा क्या मतलब, बहुत कम है ये देखा जाए। अभी परसों यहाँ पे अमिताभ कांत सर भी थे, उन्होंने भी कहा था कि 750 गीगावाट हम लोग सोच के चलना चाहिए। ये बहुत बहुत कम है। और इसमें आप देखिए कैपेसिटी अंडर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, अंडर टेंडरिंग भी है 130 गीगावाट की, तो वही है। तो जो अगर जैसे अभी विनीत ने भी बताया कि उसमें कुछ इश्यूज है पीपीए वगैरह में, लेकिन अगर वो सब हो जाता है तो सिर्फ 70 गीगावाट ही हमें करना है सोलर से। प्रधानमंत्री सूर्य घर योजना में 1 करोड़ घरों पे सोलर लगाना, जिसमें के मार्च 2025 तक 10 लाख करने, 9 लाख हो चुके हैं और 10 लाख हो जाएंगे मार्च तक, तो 90 लाख बचे हैं। अगर इसको आप, और एवरेज प्रोजेक्ट कैपेसिटी अगर आप देखो किसी के घर में भी लगे तो 5 किलोवाट की एवरेज आती है, क्योंकि कोई 3 लगा रहा है, कोई 6, कोई 8 ऐसे लगा रहा है, 5 आता है। तो 45 गीगावाट तो सिर्फ प्रधानमंत्री सूर्य घर योजना से हो सकता है, जो बहुत बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन है। और ये हो जाएगा टारगेट के हिसाब से बोले तो मार्च 2027 तक ही हो जाएगा। उसके बाद 27, 28, 29, 30 अपने पास देखा जाए तो पूरे 4 साल बचे ही, तो क्या कुछ कर सकते हैं। और इतना होने के बाद ऐसा नहीं है, इसके बाद सब्सिडी की भी आवश्यकता नहीं है। जब घरों पे सबके सोलर लगा होता है, अगर 10 लोगों के लगा है, बीच में जो 2 लोग बच गए उनको ये चीज फील होती है कि हम कहीं ना कहीं पीछे, खरबूजे को देख के खरबूजा रंग बदलता है, ये एक स्पीड थोड़ी सी आ जाएगी, उसके बाद वो लगने लग जाएगा। तो आप देखिए 45 गीगावाट तो यही हो गया, 70 चाहिए था। ये अकेला घरों पे ही लग के इतना टारगेट तो हम पूरा कर सकते हैं। लेकिन डिस्कॉम का अंदर से दिल बहुत दुखी होता है, यार ये आप क्यों सोलर लगा घरों पे या सीएनआई में। जब तक दबाव में कोई काम होता है ना, वो काम हो ही नहीं सकता। बैंक के ऊपर प्रेशर आता है कि आप लोन दो। अभी क्या है, अभी बोला रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी फाइनेंस ऑब्लिगेशन की भी बात करते हैं, आपको 5 फाइल करनी है महीने की, तो बैंक के फोन आते हैं कि भैया कोई एप्लीकेशन लगा दो सूर्य घर की, तो हम बोलते हैं कि कोई एप्लीकेशन है ही नहीं। तो आप विश्वास नहीं करेंगे, वो अपने यहाँ जिसका टारगेट है वो क्या बोलते हैं, अपने स्टाफ को ही बोलता है कि आप लगवा लो ना, आपको सोलर थोड़ी लगा, तो लग रहा है 80 में 50 अच्छा, तो अपने स्टाफ के भी लगवा देते हैं। और फिर वो ये बोलते हैं कि देखो ये 14 फरवरी तक हमें ना इतने दिखा देते हैं, इसके बाद तो हम आपकी सैलरी। तो ये इसलिए बता रहा हूँ कि दबाव वाला काम सिर्फ जब तक दबाव रहता है तब तक ही हो सकता है। दबाव की बात की गई कि अगला ही पॉइंट मेरा है सीएनआई सेक्टर, उसको इस तरह से निग्लेक्ट किया जाता है कि उनके लिए
समझा दे C&I,
कॉमर्शियल एंड इंडस्ट्रियल जो प्रोजेक्ट लगते हैं ना, उनको ऐसे निग्लेक्ट किया जाता है कि मेरे को वो जो क्रांतिवीर मूवी है ना नाना पाटेकर वाली, वो याद है। जब बनाने वाले ने फर्क नहीं किया, सोलर की बिजली एक ही है, वो भी ग्रीन एनर्जी है, लेकिन इसको बिल्कुल सपोर्ट नहीं किया जाता, ना इसके लिए पॉलिसी फेवरेबल है। अगर आपका एक्सपोर्ट हो गया, कुछ एक्स्ट्रा एक्सपोर्ट आप करते हो, तो रेजिडेंशियल में आपको 2.712 रुपए 71 पैसे राजस्थान में आपको सेट ऑफ किया जाता है, यहाँ पे कुछ नहीं मिलेगा। और आपको 10-20 चक्कर लगवाए जाएंगे। C&I को किसी तरह का कोई भी सपोर्ट नहीं है, जबकि बहुत अच्छी उसका पोटेंशियल है लेकिन सपोर्ट नहीं मिलता है। इससे ये पता चलता है कि जो भी हो रहा है वो दबाव में हो रहा है, या आप ये कह दें कि वो बाटला में और यहाँ पे प्लांट लगने हैं, वहां पे हम दिखाते हैं कि भाई हमने बहुत ज्यादा लगा दिया है, जबकि पोटेंशियल हमारे घर पे ही इतना सारा है और उससे बहुत सारे लोगों को काम मिलेगा। स्टेट के हर किसी का फायदा है। अब देखिए बड़े प्रोजेक्ट्स में इश्यूज क्या आते हैं, और इन सबका इलाज, इन सबका जो जवाब है ना, सबका सॉल्यूशन वही रूफटॉप में ही। लैंड अवेलेबिलिटी इशू, 0.3 मिलियन हेक्टेयर कैपेसिटी चाहिए जमीन की अगर हमें जो अपना टारगेट पूरा करना है। ट्रांसमिशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, राजस्थान में तो वो ग्रेट इंडियन बस्टर्ड और भाई रेगिस्तान है, लेकिन रेगिस्तान का भी एक इकोलॉजिकल बैलेंस होता है, वो भी बिगड़ता है। तो ट्रांसमिशन इंफ्रा जब अपन डालते हैं या प्लांट भी लगाते हैं तो ये सब चीजें आती हैं। लॉसेज 40% के लॉसेज होते हैं। जब 33 kV पे सप्लाई देती, फिर घर तक पहुंचने पे 440 तक घर तक पहुंचने पे 40% के लॉसेज होते हैं। उसके बाद एनर्जी स्टोरेज, अब ये कैपेसिटी जब बढ़ेगी तो स्टोरेज के बिना तो ग्रिड बैलेंस कैसे करेंगे, स्टोरेज भी चाहिए। फाइनेंसिंग का भी बहुत बड़ा इशू है। उसके बाद आता है मॉड्यूल रिप्लेसमेंट। देखिए ये मॉड्यूल रिप्लेसमेंट है, ये भी एक बहुत मतलब चूंकि हम एनवायरमेंट और ये सब बातें कर रहे हैं तो ये पॉइंट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। बड़ा प्लांट जब लगता है तो उसमें पीपीए साइन किया जाता है, उसको ज्यादा बिजली से मतलब है। अगर उसको लग रहा है कि मैं पॉली के मॉड्यूल 3 साल 4 साल बाद हटा के यहाँ पे मुझे मोनोमर या टॉपकॉन या एचजेटी अभी आ रहा है वो लगाना है, उससे मुझे ज्यादा फायदा है, तो मैं ये हटा दूंगा। अब ये मॉड्यूल कहाँ जा रहे हैं, किस काम में, वो मॉड्यूल बनने में भी एक एनर्जी यूज हुई है, हमारे प्रकृति के रिसोर्सेज यूज हुए हैं। अब वो मॉड्यूल किसी काम के नहीं, जबकि वो 25 साल के लिए बनाए गए। एटलीस्ट हम पूरा एक्सट्रैक्ट तो करें उससे, तो ग्रिड इंटीग्रेशन भी एक इशू आ जाएगा, क्योंकि शेड्यूलिंग वगैरह की जब बात आएगी ज्यादा जब हो जाता है। और इस सब का इलाज यहीं पे। आप देखिए सिर्फ रेजिडेंशियल की अगर बात करें, हमारा टारगेट तो बहुत कम है, 637 गीगावाट पोटेंशियल है सिर्फ घरेलू का। मैंने कॉमर्शियल एंड इंडस्ट्रियल मतलब पूरा रूफटॉप तो लिया ही, अगर हो सकता है 1000 गीगावाट हो जाए अगर मैं पूरा रूफटॉप ले लूं। 637 गीगावाट है, ये वो पोटेंशियल है कि हमारी जितना रूफ का एरिया है घरों की रूफ पर। उसके बाद आता है, अगर हम इसको एक स्क्रीन आउट करते हैं, एक स्टेज आगे जाते हैं, कि अगर मैं उस घर की जो है इलेक्ट्रिसिटी डिमांड के हिसाब से जब सोलर लगाना चाहूं तो भी 118 गीगावाट का पोटेंशियल है। इतना तक तो लग सकता है घरों पे, मतलब ये रिक्वायरमेंट है घरों की। फिर अब इसको मैं देखता हूं कि इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी, क्योंकि किसी का क्या है आधा किलोवाट की रिक्वायरमेंट है, तो उसका जो छोटे प्लांट होते हैं वो थोड़े महंगे पड़ते हैं, तो उसका इकोनॉमिकली उतना वायबल नहीं हो, इसलिए वो नहीं लग पाएगा। अगर हम वो वायबिलिटी भी देखेंगे 3, 4, 5 साल में पे बैक आ जाएगा, तो भी 102 गीगावाट का पोटेंशियल बच जाता है। फिर आता है विलिंगनेस टू पे, भाई कंज्यूमर के पास पैसे नहीं है, भैया लगाना नहीं चाहता है, तब भी 11 गीगावाट बचता है। यही 11 गीगावाट जो है वो 45 गीगावाट जो मैंने बताया था ना रेजिडेंशियल वाला, पीएम सूर्य घर वाला, वो इस तरह से हो गया है क्योंकि जो गवर्नमेंट की सूर्य घर योजना है उसमें 7% पे लोन मिल जाता है। 3 किलोवाट या 2 लाख तक अगर आप लोन लेते हो तो 7% पे मिल जाता है, बिना कोई आपका इनकम प्रूफ कोई भी डॉक्यूमेंट देंगे। तो वो 11 गीगावाट जो बचा था, क्योंकि लोगों के पास पैसे नहीं है लगाने के लिए, तो वो तो हो गया 45 गीगावाट। लेकिन ओवरऑल क्योंकि हमारा एक इशू था कि लैंड अवेलेबिलिटी नहीं, तो हमारे पास 637 गीगावाट की जो छतें हैं, इसको हम अब देखिए सारे इसमें समाधान मिल जाएंगे। ट्रांसमिशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर
आगे बढ़े।
हाँ, मैं बस अब ये लास्ट स्लाइड ही। तो ट्रांसमिशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की जरूरत ही नहीं है, आपके घर पे लगा हुआ है, वहीं पे यूटिलाइज। डिसेंट्रलाइज जनरेशन हमेशा सही होता है। लॉसेज आपके कम हो गए 40%, तो क्योंकि हम बार बार क्या देख रहे हैं, इंस्टॉल्ड कैपेसिटी को नहीं देखे, हम देखें कितनी पावर जनरेट हुई और हमने उसको यूटिलाइज करा कि नहीं करा, वो चीज। स्टोरेज की बात करें तो अभी देखिए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ पावर ने एक एडवाइजरी जारी की है कि जहां कहीं भी सोलर लगता है वहां पे 2 घंटे का बैकअप होना ही चाहिए। तो वो घरों पे भी वो चीज अप्लाई करनी चाहिए। बल्कि सूर्य घर योजना की अगर मैं बात करूं तो ये हाइब्रिड इन्वर्टर या स्टोरेज के लिए एडिशनल सब्सिडी देते हैं, वो ज्यादा सही है। इससे क्या ग्रिड बैलेंस में भी, क्योंकि आने वाले समय पे हम जब डिमांड रिस्पॉन्स और स्मार्ट ग्रिड की बात करेंगे ना, तो उसके लिए फिर हम वहीं पे फंस जाएंगे कि हमारा बेस तो तैयारी नहीं। फाइनेंसिंग यहाँ पे क्या, हर घर आप घरेलू उपभोक्ता की जेब से पैसे लग रहे हैं, इन्वेस्ट हो रहे हैं, तो वो एक ये भी सॉर्ट आउट हो गया। मॉड्यूल रिप्लेसमेंट की जो बात आई ना, तो जब घर पे कोई लगाता है वो पूरा उसको यूटिलाइज करता है, उसकी देखभाल भी करेगा, वो उसको 25 साल तक चलाएगा नहीं, हो सकता है 40 साल तक चलाए। और इनको हम ऐसे यूज कर सकते हैं। आप वर्चुअल नेट मीटरिंग, रूफ ऑन रेंट, डिजिटल सोलर भी आजकल तो चल गया, जिसका आधा किलोवाट भी है, वो भी सोलर में एज अ इन्वेस्ट कहीं पे भी लग गया है। अभी मुंबई बेस्ड एक कंपनी, एक ब्रिक भी आप परचेज कर सकते हो 500 वाट की, उसका आपका क्या रिटर्न है, जितनी बिजली बन रही उतना हिसाब से आपको इन्वेस्टमेंट के हिसाब से। तो इन सब कॉन्सेप्ट को हम यूज करके ये कर सकते हैं। अब इसमें एक लास्ट पॉइंट है मेरा कि ये तो सब मैंने बता दिया कि 45 गीगावाट और इतना सब हम बना लेंगे, लेकिन जो सूर्य घर योजना है इसमें डीसीआर मॉड्यूल लगते हैं।
डीसीआर का क्या मतलब बताएं?
डोमेस्टिक कंटेंट रिक्वायरमेंट,
हाँ।
मेड इन इंडिया। वो उसका सेल जो है वो इंडिया में बना होना चाहिए। और इंडिया में सेल की कैपेसिटी है सिर्फ 6 गीगावाट मानिए, तो 6 गीगावाट सेल बना के हम ये 45 गीगावाट का टारगेट कैसे अचीव करें, ये बहुत बड़ा सवाल है। और
ये सवाल मुझे लगता है लास्ट सेशन में भी आएगा, आप रुकिएगा, क्योंकि पूरा ट्रेड का जो सवाल है वो सारा यही है। क्योंकि अब डोनाल्ड ट्रंप भी कह रहे हैं डोमेस्टिकली बनाऊंगा, हम भी कह रहे हैं, वो सही कह रहे हैं कि डोमेस्टिकली बनाएंगे, क्योंकि हमें भी अपनी उद्योग और इंडस्ट्री को बढ़ाना है। मगर अगर एक तरफ से हम डोमेस्टिक रिक्वायरमेंट रखते हैं, इसमें बिल्कुल जो स्कीम है कि अगर आप सूर्य घर योजना की सब्सिडी सरकार से लेते हैं तो आपको वो ही मॉड्यूल खरीदना पड़ेगा जो डोमेस्टिकली बना है। और सही है, सरकार हमारी सरकार सब्सिडी दे रही है, तो वो कह रही है कि फिर वो लो जिससे हमें फायदा हो। मगर इसमें बड़ा गैप बनता जा रहा है, क्योंकि एक तरफ से घोड़ा दौड़ रहा है, दूसरी तरफ से वो लगाम लगाए हुए। तो अब आप बैठ जाए।
सर यादव सर,
क्वेश्चंस के लिए
सर यादव सर, यहाँ मैं विनोद कुमार हूँ बेंगलुरु से। मेरा एक पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस है इधर।
सोलर,
हाँ, क्या है कि
एक
मेरा
सेकंड मैं चैलेंज कर रही हूँ जरा, थोड़ा सा एक सुनील जी, आई थॉट हमने सबका इंट्रोडक्शन किया हुआ है, इसलिए मैं देख लेती हूँ। एक सेकंड में जरा आप बताएंगे ये जो एसोसिएशन है आपकी,
लेकिन किस चीज का, किन लोगों का है?
ये मेनली देखिए एसोसिएशन है मेरी, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी एसोसिएशन ऑफ राजस्थान। ये राजस्थान के जो वेंडर्स हैं, ईपीसी प्लेयर्स, मेनली जो रूफटॉप के ईपीसी प्लेयर्स हैं, उनकी एसोसिएशन है।
वेंडर्स एसोसिएशन।
हर
ये
स्टेट में
बच्चे
है कि
नहीं सही, ओके, एंड राजस्थान, वी वांटेड अ स्टेट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव।
Is there in every state or only?
हर स्टेट में है आपकी एसोसिएशन इसमें?
अभी 2 साल ही हुए, तो जैसे अभी सर ने पूछा भाई नाम तो उसका बड़ा रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, लेकिन अभी हम सिर्फ रूफटॉप पे ही काम कर रहे हैं, वही हमारे अभी मेंबर्स हैं, और अभी सिर्फ राजस्थान तक।
नहीं, ऐसे ही काम होता है, नहीं तो आप बड़े बन जाएंगे ना, तो फिर कुछ नहीं काम इसीलिए आपका काम बहुत अच्छा है। यस, नाउ प्लीज।
सर विनोद कुमार फ्रॉम बेंगलुरु।
Pranay, we will start your session, Amit, at 11:15. So I have 20 minutes now for question answers. Yes.
सर मेरा क्या है कि मेरा 4 पत्रकार दोस्त, वो लोग रूफटॉप के लिए प्रधानमंत्री सूर्य घर एप्लीकेशन लगाया और उनका अप्रूवल भी हुआ है, लेकिन इंस्टॉलेशन के लिए 7 महीना हो गया, आज तक कोई भी आके उनको इंस्टॉलेशन नहीं किया, इंस्टॉलेशन डिले हो रहा है। और सेकेंड क्या है, अगर आप प्राइवेट पार्टी के पास जाएंगे तो इमीडिएटली इंस्टॉलेशन हो जा रहा है। तो किसको प्रीफर करना है, सूर्य घर को प्रीफर करना है या प्राइवेट पार्टी को प्रीफर करना है? और मेरा और एक सवाल क्या है कि अगर आपका नॉन ग्रिड कनेक्शन अगर आप लेंगे तो उसका स्टोरेज का प्रॉब्लम है। तो सिटी में जो है तो जिनके पास पैसा है वो तो लगा सकते हैं, लेकिन अगर कोई गांव में अगर कोई रूफटॉप सोलर नॉन ग्रिड लगाना चाहता है तो उसको वो बहुत एक्सपेंसिव लगता है, तो उसको कम करने के लिए क्या कर सकते हैं?
जी, आप लिख लीजिए, क्योंकि मैं दोनों जो पैनल्स हैं उस पर सवाल चाहूंगी। एक मोबिलिटी पे जामोगा जी और अनुमिता जी ने बताई आपको बहुत अच्छी स्टोरी कि 10,500 बसेस आज सड़क पे हैं। ये छोटी चीज नहीं है, और इसके अंदर क्या सवाल है और आगे बढ़ने के लिए। और दूसरा रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी रूफटॉप। हाँ, go ahead. And I'm going to ask everyone to note down the questions. One round I will take, get answers, and then go to the next. आती हूँ सुधीर जी, मैं पीछे भी आऊंगी, पहले थोड़ा सा आगे से खत्म कर दूँ। हाँ,
This is not so much of a question. मैं हिंदी में बात नहीं कर सकती।
कोई बात नहीं, no problem.
So I just want to share something from where I come. I come from Hyderabad. So in Hyderabad in Telangana, this new and renewable energy corporation, they have taken an innovative measure whereby they tied up with the SHG groups. So SHG groups have a bank, Srinidhi Bank. So for rooftop installation, they will be getting loan at a very low interest rate from this bank. So Srinidhi Bank tied up with Energy Corporation, Renewable Energy Corporation, and now they are in the job of installing rooftop solar panels on all the households which are below poverty line.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and one more thing.
I just have a lot of hands.
One more. So I just want to know the progress under PM Surya Ghar. Even apartment complexes are covered, I believe. So what is the progress on that front? Because if it is made mandatory in the building rules, saying all builders should be installing these rooftop installations, that will have a much more.
Please pass on the mic.
My question is to you this. When I did my story on renewable energy, I found three major challenges the government is facing, and they are taking away the lands of tribals and Dalits. Like वो जो land scarcity है, for example जो कोनार्क सिटी को, वो सिटी नहीं वो टाउन है, तो उसको जब पूरा रिन्यूएबल करने का सोचा है गवर्नमेंट, तो वो एकदम कलाहंडी एक एरिया है जिसमें ट्राइबल्स का लैंड है। सो वो एक छोटा सा कंट्रोवर्सी था, और मुझे लग रहा है हमको रिन्यूएबल तो चाहिए पर लैंड कहाँ से आएगा, और जो कॉमन लैंड है जो ग्रेजिंग के लिए लोग यूज करते हैं उसको ले रहे हैं, तो वो एक बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है। और दूसरा है मेंटेनेंस का, और तीसरा है जो ई वेस्ट का बात करते हैं, तो ये जो सोलर का जो वेस्ट निकलेगा उसका आगे जाके क्या करेंगे?
ठीक है, सुधीर पीछे, I'm going to try and do this like an orchestra. So सुधीर पीछे आप, सुधीर जी पीछे, दो क्वेश्चन पीछे से, फिर आगे आऊंगी। थोड़ा सा मुझे इसको संभालना पड़ेगा, बहुत ज्यादा उत्सुकता है, बोलिए।
मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जब जो सोलर रूफटॉप है, जब वो पीएम योजना में रजिस्टर होकर उससे उनको इंस्टॉल किया जा रहा है, उनसे बिजली बन रही है, तो डेटा मिलने में क्या प्रॉब्लम है? क्यों डेटा नहीं मिल रहा है?
डेटा जेनरेशन का क्यों नहीं मिलने को आ रहा है? जेनरेशन का ना, आपको नंबर्स मिल रहे हैं।
जब इंस्टॉल का हमारे पास है और जनरेशन का डेटा तो वही का मिलने में क्या दिक्कत है? वही एसी टीम से भी दिखता है। अभी जो इससे पहले वाला था उसमें ये था कि डेटा मिलने में प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, डेटा पब्लिक नहीं हो रहा, तो क्यों नहीं हो रहा है?
ठीक, इस क्वेश्चन को रोक के रखिए। एक और था, यस मैडम।
I wanted to I had this I worked with Janak Palta ma'am once for a very short period of time. So she was saying that she also got solar panels for the rooftop for all the people in all the villages. So they had to also organize the training workshop to install your own rooftop solar panels.
What's your question?
So I'm saying that since they were saying कि कोई आ नहीं रहा है like panel install करने, so they can have their own, they can have a training workshop which is probably
fair enough. Okay, madam here. Madam, अब आगे आप-
मुझे दो बातें कहनी थी। एक तो ये कि जो टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट है, क्या ये फिर जो अभी हम जो फिलहाल जिस तरह के पैनल्स लगा रहे हैं, क्या ये इसको अगले 5 या 10 साल में ही चेंज करने वाले हैं? और जो ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, क्या ये भी अगले 5 से 10 साल में ये जो पूरा हम रिन्यूएबल को जिस तरह से अभी हम सोलर पैनल लगाने की होड़ में है कहा जाए, तो क्या वो भी फिर चेंज हो जाएगा? वहां भी एक बड़ा शिफ्ट आने का है।
आज तो न्यूक्लियर का सवाल है, हाइड्रोजन तो पीछे हट गया, तो न्यूक्लियर है, तो क्या आपका रिन्यूएबल चलेगा कि ये तोड़? आप रोक के रखिए, सवाल बहुत अच्छे हैं, सवाल बहुत अच्छे हैं। अब मैं इस तरफ आती हूँ, फिर मैं लास्ट में इस तरफ आती हूँ। Hold on, just hold on. I'm really trying to do this like an orchestra. Okay? So, Janto, I have you, then I have you, and then I have you. फिर मैं एक फिर लास्ट। अच्छा चलिए, तीनों आप ले लीजिए। मैं ठीक देखिए तो इतना आप लोगों ने क्या इंटरेस्ट इवोक किया।
मैंने भोपाल में अपने घर में रूफटॉप लगवाया है, करीब 4 साल हो गए। तो मुझे उस तरह कोई ऐसी योजना नहीं थी, तो मुझे प्राइवेट वेंडर से लगवाना पड़ा। और करीब 1.5 लाख का खर्चा है 3 किलोवाट 3 वाट के लिए। तो वहां पे अभी तक 3 किलोवाट में अभी तक यहाँ पर ऐसी कोई व्यवस्था नहीं बनी है। जो कुछ लोग और लगवा रहे हैं, अपने गाड़ी लोग लगवाते हैं, देखते तो 1 दर्जन लोगों ने लगवा दिया सोसाइटी में उसके बाद। लेकिन उसके भी बड़ा गैप है, मतलब कि लोग अप्लाई करते हैं और वेबसाइट पे जाते हैं, काफी चीजें उसमें चीजें हैं कि आप अप्लाई करते हैं, जो वेंडर है उससे लगवा सकते हैं आप। दूसरा ये है कि रूफटॉप के अलावा आप जैसे जो फार्मर है, अब लैंड का बड़ा इशू है, तो क्या फार्म लैंड में हम लगा सकते हैं वहां पर, और नीचे वो फार्मिंग भी होती रहे, जो कि किसान की आय बढ़ाने का चल रहा है लगातार, कि उसकी आय दोगुनी करनी है या बढ़ानी है। क्या दोनों चीजें ऐसा हो सकती है क्या, जो कोई मॉडल बन सकता है?
मैं पूछना चाह रहा था अनुमिता जी से। अनुमिता जी, क्या ये इसकी कोई संभावना है कि इस तरह से पहले पेट्रोल और डीजल की जो कार थी उनको सीएनजी में कन्वर्ट किया गया और उसको आरटीओ ने अप्रूव भी करना शुरू कर दिया? क्या ऐसा भविष्य में संभावना है कि डीजल और पेट्रोल की कारों को इलेक्ट्रिक में कन्वर्ट किया जा सके?
ठीक, बहुत अच्छा सवाल। आपके आगे
ये एक समस्या आ रही है, जैसे डोमेस्टिक जनरेशन के लिए लोग थोड़ा रूफटॉप लगा रहे हैं, ठीक है, ग्रिड कनेक्शन भी हो जा रहा है, ग्रिड कनेक्ट भी हो जा रहा है। मैं बिहार और झारखंड 2 स्टेट का एक्सपीरियंस बता रहा हूँ। लेकिन वहाँ डिस्कॉम क्या कर रहा है कि जैसे मान लीजिए आपका जो मंथली कंजम्पशन है तो वह उसी में कम, आपने ग्रिड कनेक्ट भी करा दिया। मान लिया जाए कि आपने 50 किलोवाट आपका जनरेटर और आपने 30 किलोवाट आपने डिस्कॉम से लेकर के कंज्यूम किया। मैं कम्युनिकेट कर पा रहा हूँ ना। अब ये जो बीच का जो 20 किलोवाट का जो बैलेंस है, डिस्कॉम इसका पैसा नहीं देना चाहता, इसके कारण लोग डिस्करेज हो रहे हैं। और डिस्करेज उनका कहना है कि नहीं, वो फिर आप ज्यादा यूज कर लीजिए बिजली का, हम इसका पैसा नहीं दे सकते।
तो डिस्कॉम का सवाल मैं भी इसको आंसर करना चाहूंगी।
और ये 2 स्टेट का मेरा एक्सपीरियंस बिहार था, इसके कारण लोग ज्यादा कैपेसिटी का सोलर रूफटॉप लगाने से परहेज कर रहे हैं, मतलब अब डिस्करेज किया जा रहा है। और इधर की जो स्टेट की जो रिन्यूएबल डेवलपमेंट अथॉरिटी है, वो भी इसमें कुछ नहीं कर पा रहे।
You have a question? Please, I heard you since. So good.
2 questions. One is that 500 gigawatt, 50% target for 2030 also in NDC. Now it's 13%, I understand. Renewable percentage?
No, there is only target India has set is a 500 gigawatt target by 2030. Everything else is an extrapolation backwards of that target. The only target India has is 500 gigawatt of non-fossil energy by 2030.
Also having 50% of the installed capacity?
No, that is all not a target. There's no target. It's not a target.
It's not a
So
target.
that was Prime Minister made that statement
Exactly,
in
that's what I
Glasgow.
thought.
But then after that, the only official target is 500 gigawatts.
But 2030, what is our expectation from percentage of expectation from renewable?
So that is in our book. You have to, just to explain to all of you, the target is only one. We have gone back to understand who did the back-end calculations for the target, which is CEA. And CEA has said that for 500 gigawatts, you need to have about 300 gigawatts of solar. That's the back end, and about 22% of the energy, electricity generation will have to come from solar to meet the 500 gigawatt. But these are not targets of the government.
Okay, thank you. And about the EV, I spoke to various kind of dealers and all in West Bengal about this EV. Now there is a perception, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, that if you don't drive a car more than 50-60 kilometers a day, EV is not profitable. So that's a point being made by many. So I just would like to know from you, because that will cut down a lot of domestic users. Only the commercial people can do that. So what's the exact scenario? And also if you can say that what is the total number being told, total number predicted on EV buses, if there is any data on this.
Two questions, both of you hold on. Yes.
I have a question for Mo Acharya. This is Calcutta specific because there is a huge gap in demand supply, and number of buses has drastically gone down over the years. And now, because there was a promise, Transport Department claimed that around 1,000 EV buses will hit the street, but that hasn't happened. And when we asked the Transport Secretary, they said some legal issues are there. We are yet to get the buses. So what's the issue, and how can it be met?
Okay. Out of control. You just have to connect everything equal. Okay?
Another I have a question for you. I read your article in Downtown magazine last year. It was regarding recycling of ion batteries. So some of private vendors have come up in UP and Delhi. You have mentioned there. So they are doing the recycling of these ion batteries. I just want to know one thing: are the labor force there is skilled to do the recycling part? And plus, importantly, how it is then health hazardous to these workers if there is no, this kind of skill there? Are the parameters they have to take the precautions and all? How far we are into in this?
Okay. Yes. 25
Thank you. Yeah, my question is a little bit different, and I am asking it at the risk of being practically by Sinta ma'am. So my question is, what could be the environmental cost of this massive shift from fossil fuel to batteries?
Okay.
Because production of batteries will entail large-scale extraction of minerals, and this can lead to starting mining activities. And there is also the question of disposal of waste.
Yes.
So how these are going to be tackled so that the environment is protected adequately?
Yes, please.
Yeah, my question is also around the waste part, because I believe all the electric vehicles are based on batteries and they have this specific shelf life, I believe, and also almost 70-80% of the cost of at least personal electric vehicles is the battery. So what about end of life? And also, like for example, for all these other waste, companies have EPR responsibility. Does that also work for these batteries as well? I mean, I believe there are so much batteries for all. So how are we going to look at that monumental problem?
Good questions. Sunil, संजय जी आप प्रश्न था मगर संक्षेप।
मेरा सवाल अनुमता जी से था। हम ई मोबिलिटी की बात कर रहे हैं, ई बसों की बात कर रहे हैं। दिल्ली ऑलरेडी देश भर में सबसे ज्यादा ई बसें रख रही है, लेकिन उसके बावजूद वहाँ का पॉल्यूशन जो है वो शायद कम नहीं हो पा रहा है। क्यों नहीं हो पा रहा है और क्या इसके सुधार की जरूरत है?
सुनील जी, फिर प्रदीप।
मेरा सवाल अनुमिता और अजय दोनों से। अनुमिता, इट इज अ प्लेजर लिसनिंग टू यू। आप शंकर महादेवन का ब्रेथलेस है ना?
सुनील, आपसे हमारी बात मेरी हम लोग अनुमिता से कहते हैं जब तो 10 मिनट का प्रेजेंटेशन होता है तो 50 स्लाइड होती है। अनुमिता ये कैसे होगा? नहीं मैं कर लूंगी। अनुमिता
She has crossed the speed of Obama.
JNU से तो आप समझ सकते हैं।
Now I appreciate it. तो अनुमिता, अजय दोस्त से मेरा बड़ा सिंपल सवाल है। मेरे घर पर कार है, इलेक्ट्रिक कार है। When I can use the panel size which is for the fit to the rooftop of a house, normal house, जो कार को पूरा चार्ज कर सके, तभी वो बैटरी होगी. अभी तो मैं पावर ग्रिड से लेकर उसको चार्ज करता हूँ. I want a solar to battery to car. ये एक हुआ, एक छोटा सा और ये है. चलिए.
Pradeep, I have you, then I have three of you, and then I'll come right to the back. नहीं, हाथ मत करिए.
मैंने तो अध्यक्ष रखा.
नहीं, ये ठीक आपने रख दिया. चलिए आप दो. ठीक.
Yeah, actually the last few questions addressed my concern. It's about whether there is absolutely no waste from this electric energy project, whether the batteries are perpetually recyclable, or whether it is a perfect conversion of energy, of matter to energy, which I think happens only in nuclear energy. Is this a similar kind of thing, that there is no waste about from this electric project?
Okay, so then I have the two very patient men here. Hang on, just hang on. I have two very
मेरा
patient
पहला प्रश्न अजय जी को है. अभी रूफ कूलिंग कॉन्सेप्ट अभी जारी है. हरियाणा में तो कंपलसरी है, 30-40 से ऊपर ज्यादा सेट है तो वो तो कंपलसरी है. लेकिन मैं ऑब्जर्व कर रहा हूँ वो रूफ कूलिंग शीट, जीआई शीट वो अलग है और एक तरफ ये सोलर पैनल अलग है. क्या हम ये दोनों को एकत्रित कर सकते हैं टेक्निकली? रूफ कूलिंग जीआई शीट लगा रहे हैं आजकल, मतलब रूफ कूलिंग वो भी एसडीजी में है, उसके अनुसार लगा रहे हैं. एक बिल्डिंग में एक तरफ वो लगाते हैं और एक तरफ सोलर पैनल लगाते हैं. क्या हम इन दोनों को एकत्रित कर सकते हैं? और दूसरा सवाल महुआ जी के लिए है, ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉर्पोरेशंस आर डिमांडिंग फॉर सब्सिडी बट गवर्नमेंट्स आर नॉट रेडी टू प्रोवाइड इट. If they are providing up to some extent only, let's say we can say 50%, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, pass. अब मैं बिल्कुल कंट्रोल में रहूंगी, मैं बिल्कुल कंट्रोल से बाहर नहीं जाऊंगी. रुक जाइए आप.
I am trying to look at the impact assessment. I was one of those people who was on the ground when the GCC model led to the fear of people getting laid off, the drivers in Bangalore. So we covered it extensively and how that the model was pushed without looking at the impact and without taking into consideration the stakeholders' views. Now the same way we are looking at the RE push. Now Karnataka has some 3,000 megawatt of energy which they are unable to take the grid because they don't have the capacity right now. So what they are doing is they are pushing for PSPs, the pump storage projects, and this is happening in the Indian sanctuary, which is in the heart of Western Ghats. And there are 54 PSPs across the country, and many of them are in this kind of very sensitive areas. Are we looking at the impact assessment of what we are pushing for when we are writing for RE?
I am so amazed at these questions. Because I really believe कि इस पूरे सेशन को हमें पूरे दिन का करना चाहिए. इतनी चीजें हैं इसमें बात करने के लिए. आप लोग really fantastic presentation. मगर मैं कुछ और क्वेश्चन लूंगी. मैं आपसे एक चैलेंज है. आप खाली एक क्वेश्चन चूज करिए और जितना प्रोवोकेटिव क्वेश्चन है उसको चूज करिए, उसी का आंसर मैं आपको टाइम दूंगी. ठीक है? नहीं आप मेरा माइक लीजिए.
So my
I'm coming.
Chowdhury, if everybody is watching, yes, ma'am, sir. My question is not about what's like our problems. We have to look for the solutions, right? So I'm just imagining that Mohaji's 12,000 buses are fitted with solar panels. They are generating energy, EV, no batteries. So it's all, can it happen? Can we see that in
So two
mobility?
interesting questions. Can you replace rooftop with just roof and solar together? Can you make sure that your batteries can also drive the bus? Okay, very interesting. Yes, you have the mic. Mera mic वापस करिए. No, hang on.
While we talk about solutions, I also wanted to focus a little bit on challenges. Why is it that there is such little talk on how to make the transition fair? And where does the policy stand as far as just transition is concerned, and what are the challenges?
Such a big question. You'll have to talk to these guys outside. Yes.
Do we have the grids for 500 gigawatts of renewable energy?
मैम हम लोग ई वेस्ट और सोलर पैनल वेस्ट के लिए कितना तैयार है?
वो सवाल आया था, वो है आपका कोई और अलग से सवाल है? पूनम जी, आई कम टू यू। कोई और सवाल है?
I just want to ask Mahua ji, we have seen this mushrooming of three-wheelers for the public mobility and all, and there are no rules and regulations. They keep tumbling on the roads. They are a health hazard and a safety hazard for everyone. But nobody keeps talking about that. Plus, the drivers, they have to get loans for these vehicles, and they are not able to repay it in time because the earnings are so less, the 10 rupees per kilometer, and they are not making it. So how do we deal with that? Is there a policy guideline or structure for that?
I think lots of reality check is happening here. Okay, I will take up 3 more questions with one condition. All of you, if you agree, you will get your tea from outside and come back right in. Okay? So we don't delay the next session. Okay. ठीक है.
मेरा सवाल ईवी और रूफटॉप दोनों के लिए है। जैसे जो हाई एल्टीट्यूड एरिया है, जैसे लद्दाख है, हिमाचल है, उत्तराखंड है, उन एरिया में ईवी और ये रूफटॉप कैसे परफॉर्म करेंगी, कितने एफिशिएंट होगा?
हिमाचल में तो बसें बहुत अच्छी चल रही है। हाँ, कभी अच्छा सवाल है।
सोलर में सबसे बड़ी परेशानी रिपेयरिंग होती है।
हमारे यहाँ 2 से 3 गांव को पूरी तरह सोलर से कर दिया गया था कि ये सोलर गांव है। आज उन गांवों में के सारे सोलर खराब पड़े हुए हैं, कोई रिपेयरिंग करने वाले हैं। कंपनियां भी कह रही हैं कि हमारा इतना ही दिन का था टेंडर, मेरा टेंडर खत्म और उनका सोलर वैसे ही रखा गया। तो इसमें क्या सरकार की कोई योजना है या आप लोग कुछ कर रहे हो?
बहुत अच्छा सवाल। ये बात हो रही थी अजय जी कि किस तरह से इसको इस सवाल को टैकल करेंगे।
दूसरा सवाल है व्हीकल को लेकर जो पॉल्यूशन है। बिहार, दिल्ली की गाड़ियां बैन हो जाती है 15 साल के ऊपर वाली डीजल गाड़ी,
वो आपके यहाँ आ जाती है?
वो हमारे यहाँ चली जाती है
बिल्कुल,
और वहाँ जाके रजिस्ट्रेशन हो जाती है। हमारे यहाँ नहीं, यूपी में जाके रजिस्ट्रेशन हो जाती है। तो इसमें क्या करें? पॉल्यूशन तो नहीं करके पैदा ही रहा हो।
एशियन तो एक ही है ना भाई, उनका भी तो एक इम्पोर्टेंस है ना। दिल्ली की गाड़ियाँ क्यों? ठीक है, वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन। चलिए पूनम जी, आंसर तो मेरी
मेरा एक छोटा सा सवाल है। दिल्ली के लोग जब अपनी पर्सनल इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल लेके मानेसर क्रॉस करते हैं तो उन्हें किसी भी ई चार्जिंग स्टेशन पे बैकअप नहीं मिलता है। अगर लाइट गई तो वो 4 घंटे वहीं फंसे रहेंगे और वेट करते रहेंगे। और दूसरा, अगर वहाँ मानेसर क्रॉस के पार से कोई दूसरा स्टेशन दिल्ली आ रहा है तो उसको या ई चार्जिंग स्टेशन पे नोजल मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा पता नहीं।
चलिए हमारे जो 2 गेस्ट हैं, you ask your question.
उसके रिलेटेड है। One IPS officer from Karnataka had written a detailed this thing, his experience from traveling EV car. He says that every charging station has a different app. You have to download the app and charge and pay according to that. So क्या वो हर चार्जिंग स्टेशन में हर ऐप को डाउनलोड करना पड़ता है? उसको क्यों हम सिंगल ऐप बेस्ड नहीं कर सकते?
मैं चाहूंगी, क्योंकि जब आप समझ रहे हैं, मैंने इसीलिए आज फ्लोर को बंद किया, क्योंकि ये सब चीजें इनका अनुभव जो है, एक्सपीरियंस जो है, ये जमीन का अनुभव है और ये बहुत जरूरी है सुनना हमें और समझना। आंसर्स नीदर अजय जी के पास होंगे, ना महुआ जी के पास होंगे, ना अनुमिता जी, ना विनीत जी के पास होंगे। मगर जो आपके सवाल है वो मेरे लिए एक रियलिटी चेक है और सबके लिए एक रियलिटी चेक है कि ये एक सवाल है, इनसे हमें हैंडल करना है। मैं चाहूंगी, और मैं आपको इम्पॉसिबल टास्क दे रही हूँ, और मैं अनुमिता आप और विनीत को नहीं चांस दे रही हूँ। मैं हमारे जो गेस्ट हैं उन दोनों से कहूंगी, महुआ जी आप एक सवाल, जो बड़ा सवाल आपके लिए, आप उसका आंसर दे दीजिए, एंड देन अजय जी मैं आपको कहूंगी।
Thank you, sir. Maybe I'll pick up on this battery question. There's a lot of questions on batteries and what to do, and some of it is linked to this retrofitting issue. So, how do I charge with renewable power? I mean, it's very difficult to answer that question now because it depends on state to state.
Some states are doing captive, some states are doing notional, meaning UP discoms are saying you can have renewable power and I'll give you a certificate. Now, it's very difficult to answer that. Delhi says I have an EV tariff, and the EV tariff is 4.5 rupees plus effectively 5.5 rupees, but it is still a cross subsidy because Delhi still needs some additional new power. So I don't have a clear answer or a short answer because the answer depends on the state regulations of power supply in that state. But everything, at least in the bus contracts, have allowed the private entity to go out and get into a power purchase agreement with any other IPP that they can find, and they can produce the power and use the power accordingly. The state transport utility can also do the same. They don't have to only buy from the DISCOM, but they of course have to use the lines of the DISCOM. The other thing to do with the battery is to do some questions came in on recycling. So, right now it's absolutely correct that your transport battery life is a few years. Our reservation is so much that regardless of the warranty, there is a high chance that you will have to take the battery out. Certainly stipulated in the bus contract, at the end of 6 years, you have to replace the battery, or if the conditions fall. Our requirements say that you should be able to go through the EPR regulations. However, there is a new industry on repurposing that battery. When that battery is not fully, it is finished its transport life. I don't need it to switch on in 1 second that I put the switch on. I can repurpose the battery and use it in the power sector. The prices for that are anything between 35% and 55%, whatever we negotiate. But right now, we don't have critical mass. Our first lot of buses are carrying 350 kilowatt batteries each. And maybe in a couple of years from now, you will start getting massive critical mass. Now is a good time to look into that because that repurposing of battery helps us solve a lot of our questions around waste and degradation and useful life and value and so on and so forth, and the jobs issue.
अजय जी वो सवाल लीजिए, आप गांव का सवाल, आप उस सवाल को आंसर करिए क्योंकि ये एक सवाल बहुत बड़ा सवाल है। आप लगा तो देते हैं मगर फिर उसकी देखभाल बहुत करें।
वो सवाल भी आ जाएगा। मैं जो बताना चाह रहा हूँ क्या है, ज्यादातर लोगों ने वो पूछा था रूफटॉप और टीवी का मिक्स क्वेश्चन पूछा था। तो जैसे आपने पूछा था कि घर पे अगर मैं ईवी ले रहा हूँ तो सोलर पे क्या मुझे सपोर्ट मिलेगा, सोलर कैसे सपोर्ट कर सकता है। तो 1 किलोवाट सोलर आप 4 से 5 यूनिट मानिए, 5 यूनिट मतलब 50 किलोमीटर। अगर आप
ये सब टेक्निकल, अभी सब लोग को चाय चाहिए,
अगर आप 1 किलोवाट सोलर लगा रहे हैं, अगर आप 50 किलोवाट ईवी चलाते हैं एक दिन में, तो आप 1 किलोवाट का लगाएंगे तो आपका काम हो जाएगा। इसके बाद किसी ने पूछा था कि वो हिसार की तरफ जाते हैं तो
वो सब बाद में बात।
इसमें क्या है कि आप रिन्यूएबल के साथ, सोलर के साथ जब भी ईवी चार्जर लगाते हैं, अगर वो नेट मीटरिंग है तो उसमें बैंकिंग की आवश्यकता नहीं है, घर पे भी बैटरी नहीं लगानी चाहिए, बैंकिंग हो जाती है। आपका जो सवाल था कि भाई क्योंकि वो सोलर गांव था, मैंने यही इसमें बताने की कोशिश की है कि सोलर गांव एक सरकारी योजना में सोलर गांव बनाया गया, इसलिए वहां पे सारे जो भी लगे होंगे स्ट्रीट लाइट लगी होंगी, अब उनको देखने वाला कोई नहीं होगा क्योंकि वो गांव को दिखा के एक दिखाया गया कि मैंने सोलर गांव बना दिया। अगर आपका सोलर घर होता, मैं इसलिए घरों पे फोकस कर रहा हूँ, घर अपनी फैक्ट्री अपना घर, आप अपने घर में लगाते तो आप खुद ही धोते और नहीं तो आप अब तक किसी को ढूंढ लेते जो उसको मेंटेन कर सके।
नहीं, बहुत अच्छा, मुझे लगता है बिल्कुल साफ और स्पष्ट शब्दों में आप लोगों ने सुना है पोटेंशियल दोनों चीजों का क्या है, इलेक्ट्रिक मोबिलिटी का और रूफटॉप सोलर। ये बिल्कुल स्पष्ट है। मैं बस एक चीज आप लोगों से जोड़ना चाहूंगी कि ये जो डिस्कॉम का सवाल है, बार बार डिस्कॉम आपने भी पूछा, याद रखिए डिस्कॉम बुरी चीज नहीं है। आज हमारे पास यहाँ पर रूफटॉप सोलर है, हम लोग रात को डिस्कॉम से पावर खरीदते हैं। अगर डिस्कॉम नीचे चला जाएगा तो हमको रात के लिए बैटरी लगानी पड़ेगी जो हम नहीं अफोर्ड कर सकते। तो कुछ हद तक हमें ये भी ये लाना पड़ेगा कि डिस्कॉम भी चले और हम भी चले, और यही सबसे बड़ी दुविधा है सरकार की, किस तरह से डिस्कॉम भी आगे बढ़े और रूफटॉप सोलर भी, क्योंकि उनके बिना हम नहीं चल सकते और हमारे बिना वो नहीं चल सकते। बड़ा सवाल है।
दूसरा है मान लीजिए संपर्क जनरेशन अगर
नहीं हम भी उन्हीं को उस कॉस्ट पे दे रहे हैं। जैसे अगर आप हमारे देखें वो आभार बात करेंगे, हमारा जो सब को जाना है, ठीक है, डिस्काउंट को, और हमारे जो बिल में है वो काट के हमें बिल देते हैं पेमेंट करने को।
लेकिन कंजम्पशन से ज्यादा अगर जनरेशन,
तो हमारा कंजम्पशन से ज्यादा
जनरेशन को नहीं
देते।
ये वही है जो मैंने CN9 में बताया ना, आप तो वही इसी तरह से डिमोटिवेट, वही मैंने CN9 बताया था कि आपका जो डिस्कॉम है ना, उसके दिमाग में अभी भी ये बात नहीं आ रही, उनको समझ में नहीं आता है कि सोलर से फायदा है। उनको सीधा एक ही बात है कि सोलर से नुकसान हो रहा है, आपको कैसे रोका जाए। अगर एक लाइन में बोलेंगे तो यही बात
ठीक है,
तो कैसे रोक सकते हैं।
अब आप लोग इस पैनल को एक बहुत बड़ा हाथ दीजिए जो This shows you the level of interest. A lot of questions have not been answered. There is a 5-minute bio break. Okay? Be inside so that there is no other break. This is CSC. Okay? हमारे यहाँ आपको इतना ही मिल गया बायो ब्रेक तो बहुत है। ठीक, मैं याद करूँगी जब अनिल थे, किसी को शादी हुई थी और किसी को हनीमून में जाना था। अनिल का सवाल था।
Question actually told the story. Question told the story.
काम करिए। चलिए, thank you very very much. I'm sorry I wasn't able to. I just have to manage. So 10 minutes we will start.
He's here.
So can you please your question?
Yeah, I went. I was not there. I was traveling.
Oh yes.
The numbers were still the numbers were. Which buses route now are low? 500 plus or India? 500 or India. What's the pipeline for 5 years?
About
27,000 minus this. What are going to go down?
yeah, 27,000
Contracted but not yet delivered.
out of that,
That's good. On the same question for Calcutta or this question.
WBTC requested 1,500 buses. And they said to I could not no, they went to the platform and they lost in the first round. Long story short, they just down this division went for the stay on the yeah, so the issue is like this. This got actually very important to guys. Whatever they said amongst the leftists and these very
Why black was actually?
why Jackson was on
What is the balance?
उनको फायदा है
exactly
40% प्रॉफिट होता है ना,
first round
आपको हेल्थी डिस्ट्रीब्यूट देना, तो सब्सिडाइज होता है ना, सब्सिडाइज इंडस्ट्री से ज़्यादा महंगी पावर आपको सस्ती होगी, तो सब लॉसेस है। अगर आपको 100 रुपये बेचने
I will let them find. So in the city, the same company came in. And because of the monthly they went to the division sorry, one is the division of one says city, like actually Delhi tried to division and appeal to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court then said that उसके ऊपर से योजना के ऊपर से
ഞാൻ ഫ്ലൈറ്റിൽ മറന്നു ഞാൻ കുറെ തപ്പായിരുന്നു എവിടെയാണ് അവസാനം ഈ ഫോണിന്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ വെച്ചിരുന്നതാണ് അതാണ് മിനിയാണ് കൊടുക്കാതെ മറന്നുകൊണ്ടാ ഒന്ന് റിച്ചാർട്ട് ഒന്ന് പരിചയപ്പെടും നമ്മൾ ഇന്നലെ പറഞ്ഞ കാര്യം മതി It depends on Supreme Court, what Supreme Court says.
Supreme Court said,